Welcome in .Core. The 80s was the beginning of a new modern generation. There were hundreds of new companies, products, scientific breakthroughs, and new technologies being released to the amazement of many. In 1987, one of the most ambitious and expensive scientific projects was launched. 50 minutes north of Tucson, Arizona, in the USA, at the base of the Santa Catalina Mountains in Oracle, lies a glass and space frame facility unlike anything you've ever seen before, a set of geodesic domes and pyramids known as Biosphere 2. It was a vision that could be a step towards humans colonizing Mars. But despite being so advanced and futuristic, this project eventually turned out to be a nightmare for everyone involved. Biosphere is a 3.14-acre complex that was constructed between 1987 and 1991 with environments you would find on Earth. Its main goal was to study an artificial closed ecological system in order to demonstrate how we might support and sustain human life on other planets or moons such as Mars or Titan. The Biosphere was designed to do two things. The first one was to be a prototype for a space base on Mars, for instance, and the second thing it was designed to do was to be, if you will, a test tube for life, so we can bottle up life and study it so that we might understand more about the Earth. The terrarium design was conceived by engineer John P. Allen, and the funding would come from Ed Bass, a billionaire heir to an oil fortune. Both men had a strong interest in the environment, and with Allen's big dreams and Ed Bass's big money, the two came up with a vision to create Biosphere 2. At a conference in Oracle in 1984, Allen told everyone about his plans to build a prototype Mars colony on Earth and that the destiny of mankind was to seed Earth's life into space. Back in 1926, a Soviet scientist, Vladimir Nadsky, wrote a book called Biosphere, which later inspired Soviet scientists to build Biosphere in 1972, where 10 different experiments were done, the longest one with a 3-man crew lasting 180 days. In 1986, John Allen and others from the Biosphere project would meet with Dr. Joseph Gitelson, head of the Biosphere project, and in 1989, a group from Biosphere 2 visited the Biosphere facilities. John Allen had said Biosphere and Russian insights were important to Biosphere 2. But Biosphere 2 isn't anything like Biosphere. It was much larger, a giant, self-sustaining world with 3,800 species of plants and animals inside, and it remains the largest closed system ever created. The structure consists of 3 main sections, an airtight glass-enclosed area above ground, an area called the technosphere located underground, and a designated human habitat area. The above-ground structure is made with 7.2 million cubic feet of sealed glass supported by steel frames and is 91 feet tall at its highest point. Inside this structure were 5 ecosystems, the coastal fog desert and the tropical rainforest inside the pyramids, and between these in the middle region were the savanna grassland, mangrove wetland, and ocean complete with a coral reef. The technosphere contained all the technology to run and maintain the Biosphere environment, including 24 air handler units that controlled air temperature and humidity. Air was circulated to the air handlers from the energy center, a building external from the glass-enclosed area, which also provided hot and cold water to regulate temperature and also housed generators to power Biosphere 2. On the south and west sides of Biosphere 2 sit 2 large above-ground geodesic domes, which contain the Biosphere's lungs. These are huge variable expansion chambers that can regulate the air pressure inside the steel and glass enclosure. These giant artificial lungs were remarkable technology at the time and consisted of a heavy metal plate attached to a rubber membrane. The metal plate could be lifted or lowered to regulate the air pressure inside the domes as needed. All this technology wasn't cheap. The original budget for the Biosphere project was $30 million, but by the time the project was fully realized, it had already cost $200 million. It was funded by businessman Ed Bass, who provided $150 million until 1991. This would equate to around $363 million in adjusted dollars today. The project was very ambitious, and everyone thought it would be a huge success, as great as many other projects during that time. But big money doesn't always mean something is going to be successful. The wildest thing was about to happen that would have the whole world watching. In September 1991, 4 women and 4 men, called Biospherians in NASA-style jumpsuits, volunteered to enter Biosphere 2 and live inside without exiting the structure for 2 years. Each one of these people was trained to do specific tasks during the mission, and of course, there was a doctor among them. But agricultural tasks took up most of their time because they were expected to produce their own food, including vegetables and grains, meat, eggs, milk from farm animals, and fish raised in aquaculture beds. However, the biosphere didn't stay sealed for long. Just 12 days after going in, Jane Poynter, a young English woman in charge of the farm, put her hand in a threshing machine and severed her finger. The group's doctor was unable to reattach it, and she was evacuated from Biosphere 2 for surgery. She re-entered the biosphere with a duffel bag containing some circuit boards and a planting plan for the rainforest. It was the first time the public and media started to mock and ridicule the project, claiming her bag was filled with supplies and also saying that leaving the biosphere would not have been possible on Mars. There were more ominous signs of trouble. Just 24 hours after the crew was sealed inside, the crew captain announced that carbon dioxide levels had risen to 521 parts per million, a 45% increase over levels outside the dome. By the following day, it was reported as 826 parts per million. Each day, the crew started feeling more tired and began running out of air while climbing the stairs. The oxygen started going down right from word go, but they didn't see it. After 17 months, oxygen levels had dropped to just 14.2%. The biospherians inside were living with low oxygen levels that mountaineers experience at 17,000 feet. The crew could barely function at all. Even the doctor was having trouble adding up simple figures and disqualified himself from duty. It was initially hoped that the artificial atmosphere was merely stabilizing itself, but as time passed, it was clear something was wrong. It wasn't until a year and 4 months into the mission that tanker trucks with 31,000 pounds of liquid oxygen were sent to the site to pump it inside. So what caused this massive failure of Biosphere 2 to create and maintain its own oxygen levels? After some research, it was found that bacteria in the soil was the culprit. When the airlocks closed on Biosphere 2, the soil bacteria had a massive party, exhaling huge amounts of carbon dioxide. Another big problem is that the vast majority of Biosphere 2 was built out of concrete, which contains calcium hydroxide. Instead of being consumed by the plants to produce more oxygen, the excess CO2 reacted with calcium hydroxide in the concrete walls and created calcium carbonate and water. After the first mission, scientists went inside and tested the concrete walls. They found that they contained 10 times the amount of calcium carbonate on the inside than the outside. To fix this problem, all the walls were coated with a protective layer. However, oxygen levels continued to be a problem. On the second Biosphere mission, not only did the crew suffer from low oxygen levels, but the level of dinitrogen oxide became dangerously high, increasing the risk of brain damage due to a reduction in vitamin B12 synthesis. But it wasn't just the humans inside who suffered from an unstable environment. The designers carefully chose a large variety of plants, animals, and insect species to be put inside Biosphere 2 to study what would happen. No one would have guessed there would be a mass extinction inside. Some species of insects thrived in this man-made environment. Cockroaches, katydids, and an insect called the trampan that found its way inside unintentionally and dominated all the other ant species. Even the toughest plant species, such as a morning glory, choked the life out of all other plants with its vines. Crew members put most of their time and energy into maintaining their food crops, but they still had a hard time growing enough food. In November 1992, the hungry crew had to resort to eating seed stalks that had not been grown inside Biosphere. Hunger was constant and debilitating, forcing the crew to budget their energy to get through the day. But the problems didn't end there. Water systems became polluted with too many nutrients, and the crew had to clean their water by running it over mats of algae. Then, after using them to leach nutrients out, they would dry and store the mats. During this time, the glass walls of Biosphere 2 were lined with TV cameras and tourists. The crew's lives turned into a reality TV show, with everyone wanting to watch what was happening inside and whether the crew would really stay inside for the full 2 years without outside help. In fact, the world's first reality TV show, Big Brother, was inspired by Biosphere 2 and aired in the Netherlands in 1999. True to reality TV fashion, months of being locked up together while struggling with their artificial atmosphere and hunger brought not only public attention, but internal division. It was later revealed that staff members made many more deliveries to the crew inside than the public or media knew. Secret deliveries of supplies, including seeds, vitamins, mousetraps, and other essentials, were made twice a month. An ex-employee also revealed that engineers had installed a carbon dioxide scrubber to artificially manage the atmosphere. When the survivability test ended in September 1993, the crew had split into two opposing groups who would not speak to each other, 2 men and 2 women on each side. Strangely, this is a normal occurrence for groups in enclosed environments, as seen in Antarctica and space. It's incredibly uncomfortable and heartbreaking, especially when your best friends are on the other side. 2 of the people involved in this split were close friends of one of the Biospherians when entering the dome. There would be a second group of 7 people to enter Biosphere 2 on March 6, 1994, after upgrades were made, including sealing the concrete walls inside. However, 2 members from the first crew, Abigail Allen and Mark Van Thilo, broke into the sealed Biosphere. The 2 were arrested, saying their reason was to save the new crew inside from dangers. During the break-in, 10% of the Biosphere's air was exchanged with the outside. Soon after, Ed Bass declared enough was enough. On April 1, 1994, at around 10 a.m., limos carrying investment bankers escorted by federal marshals arrive at the site with a temporary restraining order. The project was taken over. All locks and communication systems were changed, and crew and staff were prevented from receiving any data regarding research, safety, and operations. Much of the original data was never analyzed and is either unavailable or lost due to internal arguments and scientific policies. The second crew remained inside for 5 months and 16 days before the mission was terminated. In January 2005, the owners of Biosphere 2 announced the sale of the now 1,600-acre area, and in June 2007, the site was sold for just $50 million so houses and a resort hotel could be built. However, it was later leased to the University of Arizona, and Biosphere 2 continued to be available for research and education. In 2011, Ed Bass officially donated Biosphere 2 to the University of Arizona, along with $20 million to support its research. Biosphere 2 still stands today, and science continues inside its walls. In 2017, Bass donated another $30 million to the university to continue research into global climate change and other major scientific challenges. The Biosphere 2 experiment failed to generate sufficient breathable air, drinkable water, and adequate food for just 8 humans, despite a massive expense of over $200 million. It was a grand and ambitious experiment, in the sense that life itself is an experiment. But was it a complete failure? Although the project wasn't led by professional scientists, we cannot deny its importance. Bill Dempster, the engineering systems director and designer of the Sphere's lungs, says it was a tremendous success. Biosphere 2 seal system was so fantastic that the unexpected rise in CO2 and foreign oxygen would not have been detected if not for the total atmospheric containment. Biosphere 2 leaked just 10% of its oxygen in a year. By comparison, the retired NASA Space Shuttle leaked 2% a day. The agriculture system was arguably the most productive half-acre of land in farming history, which the Biospherians survived on for 2 years. But probably the most important part of this experiment was its cultural legacy, which brought general awareness of the Earth itself as a largely closed system that can be easily and unpredictably disturbed. It's a useful lesson of just how fragile the Earth's own biosphere can be, and humans were a very important part of Biosphere 2. Thank you for watching Dark Core.